So what we're going to do today is hear from these three artists. We have Jake Troyli, Kalup Linzy, and Ondina, and they are going to share a little bit about their practice. And then after they've done that, we'll have a chance to put them in dialogue, have them talk with one another, have them talk with you. So if you think of any questions while they're presenting, please do make note of those. We'll probably have each artist present and then open it up to questions from everybody. So without further ado, I'm going to have Jake go first. So Jake's coming to us live from his studio, which is exciting. You can see some of his work in the background. So Jake, I don't know if you want to just take it away and share a little bit about your practice and the work that you do.
Yeah, sure. So hi, I'm Jake Troyli. I'm currently based, I'm living and working out of Chicago, but I'm from St. Pete. And I went to grad school at USF in Tampa. And actually in grad school, I was a student with Eric, who's on this panel with me today. And Caleb was one of my mentors and was actually on my thesis committee. So I guess a really like a nice concise overview of my practice and what it is that I'm thinking about. I'm thinking a lot about spectacle and performance and what it means to be on display. And so I use like a comic language, and I use my own self-image or my self-portrait as what I think of as like an elastic avatar that I can kind of manipulate, stage, and bend to kind of navigate these conversations. And I think what's really interesting about the work that's in the Ringling, my work that's in the Ringling, is that it's work that I did during my thesis year, so my last year of grad school, and like the summer before. So a lot of the work that's in that show is kind of like a generative point. It's like where a lot of the things that I'm thinking about now really started to take off. So I think it's a really interesting, like going and seeing the show is really amazing, kind of, because I mean, these are things that I'm continuing to develop and think about, but this was sort of like the starting point. So to think specifically about the work that's in the show, for those of you that have seen it, there's two really large scale works with these small figures. And I think of those paintings, that way of working, as like central to my practice. If you look at the works, they're kind of like, there's this like maximalist isometric perspective where you can kind of see everything. The tops of buildings are cut off, and you can look into these little vignettes and see all the moments where all the characters are kind of playing their parts. And I think that there's like this hyper surveillance-esque motif that's really interesting to me, right? Because I'm thinking about being on display and what it means to be a spectacle. So these figures are like performing, and they're staged. In the work that's called High Noon at Ranchland, they're like little cowboys that are kind of going about their day on this ranch that's also a theme park for figures that are coming in and experiencing it all, paying admission. So it's interesting to kind of think about, for me, to think about the relationships between works, like in a body of work. So there's a large scale painting of me kind of referencing Napoleon crossing the Alps. And if you look at the ranch painting, it's sort of like a vignette that's drawn right out of that piece. So I think about, how can paintings contextualize and recontextualize each other within one body of work. But I just think that's kind of like a nice, concise, like overview of what I'm thinking about and like what is in the Ringling for me. And we can kind of just go from there. But yeah, that's kind of how I was approaching that work and how I kind of approach all my work now.
Awesome. Thank you, Jake. Eric, do you want to go next? Share a little bit about your work?
Yes, okay. And let me pull up my screen share. Okay, let me start So a little bit about my practice. So I put a quick PowerPoint together for you. So I work out of Ybor. I was born in California, but I moved here when I was a young teenager. So most of my young adolescence, adult life was spent here in Tampa. I guess we'll start 2016. That's when my practice I gone to grad school, started kind of exploring what I wanted to do. And you can see here from my earlier work, it was very just dense and overwrought. I mean, very, very, yeah, just very, very dense, right? Oil painting would take a lot out of me. There would be like months to complete a painting. And the subject matter wise, I was still kind of trying to grapple with what I wanted to do, what I was trying to say. Society, the interpersonal relationships between people, and how that manifests into the greater social framework was something that I was really interested in. But I think I was really struggling with the best way to communicate that, because if you say, look in here, then we become very criticized as a didactic. You know, I'm trying to tell you what my perception of your meaning is, and then we have, say, you know, blurred figures, or maybe too vague. And I feel like I really had a profound shift in my work the last year of grad school. And that was because for one, it took a lot of just growth, and also my medium. My oil paintings were very focused on the chemistry of paint. I would always try to, just research historical methods and practices, with the hope that I can have some sort of like one up on like my painting practice. But you know, I think it was, it kind of was a dead end a lot. But eventually I asked my professor, said, we like your drawings more than your paintings. Your paintings are just, for all those criticisms I just mentioned. Well, so I went, well, how do I find a medium that was going to make me able to draw like I paint, and paint like I draw? So I started doing ink tempera, but the ink tempera has its own fallibilities. So I came up with a formula that I wanted to mention. I don't really go over it much, but at the opening, a lot of people were very interested in it. So let me just go over real quick how I developed my formula. It comes with, it starts out with, I'll take a farm fresh eggs and different resins. So we have Venetian turpentine, which is a balsam. It comes from a tree. It's been used in oil painting a lot. Copal, which is a fossilized resin, melt inside of oil. And then I would, under heat, take the egg yolk and mix it in to create this really thick goo. And basically what the advantage is to this is that it adds a lot of plasticity to the medium. You can paint on canvas with it. You have resolubility, so you can just work indefinitely and continue to solubilize it into the medium. But you could also do quick passages of. It has the advantages of both aqueous and oil-based mediums, and it really allowed me a lot more freedom than I felt that I was having with oil paints. And that's because oil painting, I think it really kind of, for me anyway, I get so seduced by its just unctuousness that I can blend all day. Whereas this, you know, you can go just quick, gestural and fast and free, but also go back in and work. And I think the medium itself really assisted me in kind of breaking through a lot of these just barriers to my practice. You know, conceptually, it kind of adds a whole new element to it, right? I mean, we have this antiquated kind of medium, but even though it's more of like a modern take on it, I would, sorry, I had this antiquated kind of medium, or at least one that seemed kind of, at least, just calling back to earlier traditions of painting, and kind of make it more contemporary. So, and in terms of my source material here, I was very interested in how to describe society around me, and how do we get our images. And I realized that most of my images were being taken anyway from around me, either personal photos or videos, and or user uploaded media. And I, instead of like trying to create some like grand epic from them, just be more true to the original source material. And I would start by going to areas of like extreme political polarization, either by, in my own car, just driving north or south here in Florida. They still don't know that Trump lost. I hate to break it to them. But like, but also I always go to like the 2016 voting map, where you have areas of extreme, like 90% blue next to 90% red areas. And I would try to like find just really obscure places and get to know these people, and from what they're uploading to their respective like small programs. And what I've started to notice was a lot of trends of a lot of, yeah, it's not as stereotypical, right? It's not just red versus blue. It's we're in society of in almost terminal decline, and there's people. These conflicts are caused by the fact that they're suffering natural disasters, poverty, and what essentially is a a society that has made them expendable. And the trauma of this that they're trying to grapple with, I think, is the what I try to express in my work, trying to describe America in this very, very unique time. So here's how my paintings kind of developed from that. The ones here are actually more literal to the actual photo. I didn't do any interpolations of characters or anything. I didn't remove, I didn't edit. It's mostly stylistic. This was taken right outside my studio in Ybor. It was in front of a 7-Eleven on 7th Avenue with the people preaching Corinthian 7-Eleven. So I could have sworn there was just a glitch in the matrix, that, there was like this memory read error. I'm like, okay, the matrix is glitching, just take a photo of that. Different stuff. And I always found it kind of interesting that a lot of the more absurd ones, that like this, these youth group people just crucifying themselves in their church parking lot, that was, that was a literal reproduction of the source material in terms of composition and subject. The only difference would be stylistic. This was from the DMV. I lost my card. I had to go get a new one here in Tampa. But other ones, I would take a lot more freedom, yeah, just try to make my own image of it. I put a dancer that I had an image of, and this bonfire that they were building in front of a phalanx of riot police. This one, I think, was actually more literal to the original source material. These cults of preachers that you've seen everywhere. Yeah, so obviously this one is going to be a lot more creative. Liberty taken. I just trying to grasp the idea that in these small towns that have this pageantry, they love the parades, and they're just maintaining kind of like and holding on to the sense of community, but they're being destroyed through just the American social malaise and the environmental catastrophes that are wreaking havoc upon them, and the idea of like this pure Americana is just another bed of globalist extraction. And so come to like this painting that was actually featured on the catalog, which is a great honor. It's called Nearer My God to Thee. I think Ted Turner, was it, that sent a video tape out to all of his subsidiary radio stations that said, to be played in the event of the apocalypse. And it was a marching band playing Nearer My God to Thee, which is what they played on the Titanic as it was going. And yeah, here we have Our characters just, maintaining the pageantry of the formalities of our, of our social customs of marching bands, and I just love that, while everything is on fire. And I think that is kind of what I'm trying to grasp, like in my paintings, is a world that we all just as hyper normalized. We just accept it, even though nothing is right. So anyways, that is the story of my practice.
Thank you very much. And again, we will have opportunities to ask all of the artist questions once they've all presented. So last but certainly not least, we'll turn it over to Kalup to share about his work. So Kalup, whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready. So I'm just gonna talk about my work from the perspective of growing up watching soap operas. I became fascinated with soap operas growing up with my grandmother. My great grandmother listened to soap operas on the radio, and then it was sort of passed down through the family. And I was always fascinated that my grandmother, even though she was deaf and she lost her hearing at a young age, that she actually watched soap operas daily. And sometimes she would like knit, like while she would knit and sew while she watched them. And so around junior high school, I began to catch on to soap operas, and they sort of inspired me to want to act and perform. And so when I got in high school, instead of writing a paper like a science, an English paper, or doing a science project, I asked my teachers if I could create my own soap operas, as for the project. And so they said yes. And so I'm just gonna show a small clip of the first soap opera I did in high school. I think I was around 15, 16 years old. And I was 16. And you can watch this on YouTube, but I'm just gonna show a clip just to give you all some context.
What's wrong with you?
Serious.
Come in.
Help! My sister's having an asthma attack. Oh, God. Please don't let me have skin cancer, please. I will do anything, dear God.
Take a look in the mirror. Look at yourself. But don't you look too close.
So did that little scare do anything for you?
Yes, it did, to tell you the truth. Next week, my boyfriend and I are starting an environmental club in the neighborhood. We want people to know they need to recycle, stop polluting, and try not to smoke. Our kids need a better tomorrow. And in order for that to happen, we have to do something today.
I totally agree on you with that. Because people don't realize when you destroy the environment, even though you're doing it today and it's not having that big effect, but just think about it in the next few years. What about our kids and our grandkids? They won't have a place to live. They won't even be able to drink clean water. Now you better let's go play outside without taking a risk. I'll tell you, this world is going to be destroyed because of the ignorance of men.
So that was for my environmental science class. And I think I was in 11th grade. And so after I graduated high school, I went on to college, and I began in mass communications, but I ended up in the art department. Although I did take theater courses, and I also took a lot of Africana studies, and I took screenwriting. So I was still, and I was in film in undergrad. And so I was still wanted to pursue something performative, some career in performance. So in graduate school, I always tell people I evolved into a performance artist, because before I couldn't figure out if I wanted to do theater, if I wanted to do music. And another thing that was sort of holding me back, and also in mass communications, I didn't want to just do the news. And so I ended up developing these characters, sort of exploring those interests, because I was also feeling, because I was gay, that I was never going to have a career in entertainment, whether it be music or acting, because back then, in the 90s, it was sort of unheard of. And I think when Ellen came out in the late 90s, that sort of signaled a shift. And so I actually decided to come out through my work and through my artwork. But right now, I want to just show you a clip of a Christmas when I'm home for Christmas and I'm documenting my family. And I'm actually in the middle of doing my thesis project. I was in like my last year and a half. And so I think I was getting ready to shoot, but I was documenting my family and talking about my thesis project. And this isn't online. This is just footage I showed in lectures.
Papa is a man. Caleb.
Huh?
Ooh, Caleb.
What? What was it?
You was tooted up, honey.
Well, I hope you got it. Show the world. Show
I
the
don't
world.
think you could miss it,
Show
right,
the
Caleb?
world what's going on. What's going on?
Caleb, go ahead on.
You want to be on TV.
Yeah.
Slide for the camera.
Did you find it?
What?
The thing you had me out of acting like fools with.
I've been looking for it. I got to find it. I'm going to find it. Like I say, well, I hope you got to show the world what's going on.
Okay, you could miss that home.
I know that's right.
You could not miss it. Remember that home, baby? Oh,
they probably grown now.
Oh, Olivia, that's when Olivia and Nate was married. Look at that fruit and I stand there.
And I killed Nate off. Yeah. Nate back to life. Killed him again.
Okay.
Oh, Merry Christmas, everyone.
That horn, yeah.
Okay, you heard about looking. Get him his counselor. Oh, baby, they went way back. Caleb, what you filming? That's what you don't hold it.
I can use this for my thesis. Because I'm talking about how my family, like the soap operas running the family. Y'all just gave me the perfect scene.
Watching them.
Watching them, and then that's from 9 to 2. And then y'all talk about how it was back then. And I'll say how, like, most of us don't watch them that much no more, but when we grew up, yeah.
Yeah, baby. Honey, we can take it all the way back to 80s. Woo, sugar. Just take a moment to watch it faithfully. And then, hush your damn mouth. Okay. But them T rollers. Okay? Them T rollers. One TV and you had to watch. You better.
So then I'm in graduate school. I'm not going to play all of these because you can find them online. I started, this is from my thesis project, a clip of All My Children, where I play, I think, 6 characters. And I do all the voiceovers. I did all the voiceovers for my characters in this, but the other actors use their own voice. And so I do the voiceovers as a way, because I feel like that's when the work becomes video and performance art, but it's also a callback to the radio soaps, like back in the 1930s.
She called us having a memorial service tomorrow.
She need to stop. She must have been watching. Watching them damn soap operas.
I don't know. But what you want?
I need a bar.
So you can catch these on YouTube. And in 2010, James Franco saw me in a lecture giving a talk about my work and me growing up watching soap operas and being fascinated with soap operas. And he had just completed a arc on General Hospital. And so he invited me to be on General Hospital. He pitched me to the producers. I was like, there's no way they're gonna let me on TV, on daytime TV, but they said yes. And so here I'm singing Route 66. Again, you can find these clips on YouTube. I don't want to take up too much time playing these clips. And so I actually got to play a version of myself where I first appeared, as a male, and then later on they dropped in an episode where I was in drag, which you can see right here. And we shot at LA Mocha in Los Angeles. And I mean, it was a huge thing in a daytime audience, but I don't know how the art world perceived it. It seemed to be like short-lived. So then years later, I developed, from my characters, I started developing a character family tree. And so you can see these collages in the background. I don't know why that's not playing. Okay. And so you can, again, I don't know if this video is on YouTube, but I took all of my characters from various videos who are related, and I decided to put them in one family tree. The work that is in, so this is from the Bob Rauschenberg Gallery in Fort Myers. It's a art exhibition that featured me and James Franco. And so you'll find my soap opera works along with his work, and as well as our collaboration with General Hospital, the soap opera. And this is like the character family tree, and you can see, the audience like kind of go in and engage with the work. I did not do the character family tree for Skyway. For Skyway, they're mainly music videos, a character that I created called Paula Songstrong, which is a character I developed once I started the Tulsa Artist Fellowship. And she's a character that existed from, I think she was born in like 1923, and she passed away in 2004, 2006, or something like that. And so the work that I'm presenting is the work from her estate. And so you'll see, those are the videos. And some of those are like cover songs, but I wrote 2 original songs. And the other one is Okay, which is 3 characters that I've been playing for years, but I want to develop a feature film with these 3 characters. And so you have them sort of caught up in a melodrama, soap opera type situation. And then the video ends with a music video. So in this particular video, as I try to do in a lot of videos, I'm incorporating, the soap opera and music, but it's all still will translate as melodrama. And so that's pretty much a quick overview. And this is just some of the music videos, like through the years, like just a comp I play sometimes. And so I'm just gonna leave it there. And if you have any questions, I know that was probably pretty vague, but I was trying to keep it at 10 minutes. So I set my timer and didn't want to, because I could probably talk an hour and a half, but I won't do that to you all. And yeah, so back here you can see some of my paintings and my wigs and my wardrobe department. Yeah, so. Because I often thrift store shop for all of my characters, and I go wig shopping and all of that sort of thing. And I'm also developing a fashion line, so you can see some of the prints of my artwork on my clothes. And yeah.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. You are a true Renaissance man. You kind of do it all, which is wonderful.
Well, I try, but I don't know how good I am, but
well, we think you're great.
Okay, thank you.
So I want to open it up at this point. If there are audience questions, if you want to raise your hand or put something in the chat, and we can ask some questions of the artists. I'm struck by how all 3 of you really put so much of the personal into your work. in very different ways. But I'm also wondering, you know, the sort of commentary you're making, and you've all addressed this a little bit, but commentary on the contemporary moment, our sociopolitical values, our sense of collective identity. So there's, for me, I'm seeing this really interesting personal blend of, you know, your own story, your own identities, and then, you know, responding to the contemporary moment. So I guess my question is, what do you all hope a visitor would take away from engaging with your work when they come to see it at the Ringling? Is there a particular message or something that you're trying to convey, or is it a little broader than that? So I'll open it up to the three of you.
I think for me, like, I'm always wanting to insert myself into the culture from a queer perspective, because I think a queer perspective has been had been lost for so long. Like, even growing up, you know, in the Black community, I mean, you had like these great people like James Baldwin, and I think Zora Neale Hurston, but you had like a lot of queer people where their sexuality was sort of erased. And so you always just wonder, well, where were the queer people, you know, when all of this stuff was happening? You know, were they not allowed to, you know, act out their sexuality, or were they in hiding? And like, what contributions did they actually make to culture? And when they do, why oftentimes the sexuality is eliminated? And I'm not saying sexuality is everything by any means, but I feel like growing up not having those role models and that sort of thing to identify with, like, I sort of chose an identity. I had to create my own that was based on, you know, my heterosexual male figures and my heterosexual female figures. And so I just wonder had things would have been different if people were comfortable talking about queer contributions like openly.
And Jake, oh, sorry, go ahead, Caleb, go ahead.
Oh yeah, so even watching daytime soap operas, and so when I got to do, you know, General Hospital, they welcomed me, but then you start to discover that there were a lot of gay actors on daytime television, but they were just all closeted. That playing major characters. And so yeah, so.
Thanks, Caleb. Jake, I wanted to kind of return to your initial comment. You said you were very interested in spectacle and display, and I'm wondering where that interest comes from, and if you're responding to personal lived experiences or something more general than that.
Yeah, totally. So it's actually interesting because I, you know, in hindsight, you start to realize where you've like picked up all of these interests. But in undergrad, I went to undergrad on a full basketball scholarship. I played D1 basketball. Like, I'm 6'9", so when you see me, if you see me in person, don't be shocked, because I am like shockingly tall. But I played basketball on a really high level, and I think that's when I started to become like highly critical of this hierarchy that exists between like the spectacle and the spectator, right? Or like the performer and the audience. And I think that it's interesting because obviously, like, my experience with it on the NCAA level, it was one thing, and it was definitely really problematic. And like, being young, I didn't quite understand what I was navigating. But now, like, looking at the highest level performers, right? Like, if you look at like LeBron James, for instance, you know, even he at this like pinnacle of his you know, his career and his occupation, is still dealing with like this really fucked up dynamic. And it's one of the things that interests me, and actually, like, it can kind of rift me into these figures behind me. I've started like, you know, adding different characters, I guess, to the ensemble. And I've been thinking about these figures as these kind of like competitive mourners. So they're all like competing with each other to see who can cry the hardest, as they use my body as like a tool, like a battering ram. They're like moving it through space. And, you know, I think that we live in a time where, because of the ease of transmission with like Instagram, you know, Facebook, social media's prevalence, we sort of like have this immediate this kind of like immediate outlet for ideas and immediate outlet for images. And one of the things that I've been starting to notice is that there's this really like sinister I think that it's really sinister. There's people that have kind of understood that they can utilize performance for cultural capital, right? And so, like, I'm not only thinking about my image, my form as a performer, but I'm thinking of like the performances that happen in the entire like orbit of my figure's subjecthood. So I'm thinking about like people that like this that are like performing grief as a way to kind of like ascend this weird cultural rank. And so, you know, it's just like kind of been something that I'm continually exploring and like having to contend with my own relationship with, because I think one of the interesting things about being a spectacle is that there is this real tension and this real like vibrating line between that position being empowering and that position being one of hyper vulnerability. And so like I'm always, I don't know. First of all, I just think that in art making and image making, there should always be tension, right? So I want there to be this, there's never like this clear, like obvious didactic fucking answer. There is this, like, there are pros and cons. And so it's like, I have this position, like to be on display is like to be performing, to be watched, to be appreciated is this position where like you know, a lot of people find it to be enviable. It feels good in the moment, like it feels good to be seen and to be heard, but then you have to look at the darker side of that and understand that there can be this strange like parasitic relationship between the crowd and the performer, and like what happens when a body or a person is sort of just like relegated to entertainment. And you know, I think it's a lot, and it's actually kind of here. I'll give you guys a quick studio look. It's kind of why my studio is set up the way it is. It's like this is like inside my mind, right? So there's just like I'm just like absolutely top to bottomed out, just because like I work on so many pieces at once, and you know, I'm thinking about these really grander narratives, and trying to like piecing it together. But yeah, I mean, it definitely has like a real root in who I am, in terms of like growing up in this world of like being constantly on display and like this sort of human trophy, right?
Fascinating. And thank you for that sneak peek inside your studio. It was very interesting. So Eric, I want to go to you. What I think is interesting is that you're blending some of the images you've taken yourself. You mentioned that occurrence that was right outside your studio, but I think you said you're also calling from images you can find online. Can you talk about when you go out seeking images, or if these are just things you happen upon, or when you're looking for source material from online, what kinds of sources are you going on? Facebook, Instagram? Are you going to the dark web? I mean, where are you finding your source images?
A lot of it is random, because I like the random occurrence. I would start a lot of times by finding an area that I want to go to that I've never been to before. Let's say like if I were to use the internet and just like Google Street View, I would go there. Or maybe there was an event like a tragic event, an event of conflict, let's say, you know, say Charlotte or whatever. I would go not there, but outside there. I would try to, you know, turn the camera around and see what's around there. And I hope by that I can try to get a little bit more of a context, since, you know, all the struggles that we're dealing with now, they don't happen in a vacuum, right? We need to understand what feeds these people these rage. And America, we have a rage addiction, right? It's all we pretty much have left. And it gives people a sense of identity, because I think a lot of times their identity, you know, is something that they're struggling to cope with. And, you know, this post-capitalist, sorry to be hyperbolic, but a post-capitalist hellscape that we're living in.
So speaking of a hellscape, I want to ask you about the effects of the pandemic on your work. And I'm not sure if we're tired of talking about COVID or if this is still an interesting question. If we're tired of talking about it, we can move on to the next. But how did the pandemic affect your practice, if at all? Did it spur you to move in a new direction with source material? Just if any of you want to talk to that.
For me, it fed right into the direction I was going in. I mean, we saw for so long before, I mean, each of my paintings, I try to create a tension to where something bad is going to happen, right? And we feel this, everyone feels it, that we're, somehow we're still chugging along, but we have a sense of dread and fear of the future as if something's going to break it. And yet we just keep switching to a higher gear to where we can just keep dealing with it. And I think, I was, I stared into the void of like during COVID, and, it's a miracle that we were able to get through it. And, many of us didn't. And and yet we're still just going to move on. 600,000, that's an entire American city. That's a entire American city gone. And yet nobody, because we just have to switch to a higher gear and keep going on. And it's that constant tragedy, but the hyper-normalization of it that kind of terrifies me. And I think it also gives my work, its meaning is that I'm trying to capture this moment, that when is it going to break, and what is that break going to mean? Is it just going to be a slow managed decline? Is it going to be a catastrophic system failure? And yeah, I don't know. And that's what I'm trying to find out in my work and investigate by turning the camera around and seeing and trying to understand these people. The rage, the absolute rage, where is it coming from? Well, we can blame it on racism and whatever, but I don't think that is happens in a vacuum. There are predatory media apparatuses that feed that and turn us against each other. And I can't just lampoon them and laugh at them, and it's a crisis cult, and it's pitiable. If it would be funny if the consequences weren't so tragic.
Thanks, Eric. Kalup or Jake, either of you want to respond to the impact the pandemic had on your work?
Well, for me, it was cuckoo. We couldn't go to our studios for a while because I'm in the Tulsa Artist Fellowship. And so I was trying to work out of my apartment. So I ended up doing a video called Ransacking Empty Space that I did as a virtual collaboration with a friend that also does music here. And I guess when the pandemic was almost over, I didn't realize that we were allowed to have guests in our apartments, but not our studio. Mm-hmm. So technically my assistant could have came to my apartment and helped me shoot the video, but not knowing that, I went back to like the old way where I just put a camera still in the closet. And then I shot like this split screen video, which was like just crazy. I did a couple of like virtual performances, pre-recorded performances, one for New York Pride and then one for the New Orleans Film Festival. Mm-hmm. I was actually going to try to record a live album in the jazz venue down the hallway. And we were rehearsing. We had it was going to be like a 12-song thing, and the New Orleans Film Festival, had commissioned me to do something. And so like the day before we were supposed to film, like 2 of the band members came down with COVID. Mm. So then we had to not film, and then we had to reschedule everything. And so because I need to get it done, we had to wait. And then we only did 4 songs. So the live album was pretty much scrapped. And then I got commissioned by this organization in Arkansas, I forget the name, to do the OK video. And we had to postpone twice because one time my assistant got COVID, and then another time the cast member got COVID. And I just told everyone, I'm not doing any more videos or performances until I'm vaccinated and everybody I'm working with is vaccinated. And so I decided just to focus on collage paintings, and I ended up doing a series of paintings that commented on the Tulsa Race Massacre. And originally it was only supposed to be 2 paintings for Bomb Magazine, because I reached out to them last summer about contributing to this summer's issue. And it ended up being like 6 or 7 paintings or 8 paintings. I think 6 paintings. Because a dealer I work with who doesn't represent me, Sean Horton, approached me about pitching me to David Warner's platform to show paintings on that site. And so I was like, sure, like, why not? And so they said, yeah. And so I ended up doing like 4 more paintings. So I just started painting because I was like, I'm tired of dealing with people getting COVID. Like, it was just too much. And I had to go get like 2 or 3 rapid tests. I mean, I never came down with it, but I was just sick of the whole thing, to be honest. But I worked really hard to stay productive throughout the pandemic, and it was very, very challenging.
I can imagine. I can imagine. Jake, how about you? Anything?
Yeah, it was crazy because I was in the middle of, I was doing a fellowship up in Cape Cod. It's the Fine Arts Work Center, so it's super remote in Provincetown, and it's in the off season anyway, so the town's already like, pretty desolate. And I had just started being represented by my gallery, and I was working toward my first show, and my first show with them was in September of 2020. So I had all the ideas, I had all the work. The way that I work is I draw the paintings out and I plan them really meticulously, and then I just work them all, kind of like I'm working right now, where everything's kind of like brought up all together instead of just like working one painting, finishing it, working one painting, finishing it. I work on a lot at once. So then, COVID hit, and it was definitely like I started to feel really. So the work center is amazing. It's definitely geared for work, as the name would imply, and your studio is about like 15 feet away from your apartment. So it's just like you wake up, go to the studio, go to sleep, wake up, go to the studio, go to sleep, and the repetitiveness of that kind of became something that, like, I started to feel really like Jack Nicholson in The Shining type of like, I'm losing my mind, kind of like losing yourself in the work. But I think for me, even more so than like the COVID kind of like how it shut down the country, is while I was making the work, actually like at the end of it, while I was finishing it up, was when Ahmaud Arbery was murdered. And, it was, that moment was really intense for me in a lot of ways. But what it kind of made me realize, startlingly, and I talked to my gallerist about this because I wanted us to be clear about it as like we released the press release for the work with it. One of the paintings in the show, the first painting in which there's the competitive mourners, these mourners are like mourning over my dead body. But one of them has its eye open, and he's kind of like looking at the other one because he wants to like make sure that he's crying hard enough. And it was one of those moments where I had to take a step back, and I wanted it to be really clear that like I didn't make that painting in response to the moment. And in response to what was going on, but it was more so just like this recurring truth historically, about this, like about this really familiar sight of the dead Black man, the dead Black person, and then like this immediate rush of really performative grief, and this kind of like I guess like this really contrived solidarity that was that seemed really important at the time. And I don't know, that for me was the moment. It wasn't the COVID necessarily, but it was everything else that was happening. And maybe it was the like how COVID affected the way that we interacted with everything, because we had to do so much through the screen. So then you just get to see people's sort of like really immediate Instagram responses, and this like constant influx of, again, the performance and the spectacle of responsive grief. So yeah, I guess for me, the COVID was definitely crazy, and it impacted like my social kind of network at the time, but it didn't, I was just working anyway, so it didn't impact my art or my process at all, but it definitely did, I think, enhance my scrutiny of like this culture of performance. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely like something that it is really important to me right now.
Fascinating. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm realizing we have only about 10 minutes left in our program. So I would like to open it up for audience questions. If there's anyone on the call who has a question for any of our artists, feel free to just unmute, or you can share it via the chat if you're more comfortable doing that. Give people a moment. Yeah, Marie, go ahead.
I'm old enough to think of artists referring to themselves as a sculptor, a painter, different types of thing. And several, I've seen performance art, so I'm familiar with that. And first of all, I should say congratulations to all of you. This has been really enlightening, and I can't wait to see the show. I haven't been able to get there yet, so kudos to all of you. But Jake and Eric, you refer to yourself as your practice. Is that a new terminology being used, or does it mean that you're all encompassing, that you do several different things?
Right. No, it just means, or at least in the way that I use it, when I say my practice, I just mean like everything that encompasses me making a painting, right? So like how I think out a work, how I flesh out a work, everything that goes into conceptualizing and then actually like formalizing a work. For me, that's my practice. That's, you know.
Thank you.
To that, and also I don't necessarily am always stuck doing painting, so I don't want to pigeonhole myself into that genre necessarily. But yeah, my painting definitely is painting. But what if I do a drawing? And then I don't want to say I'm a drawer. So just the practice, all encompassing from concept to execution.
This is a term I haven't heard.
Yeah,
before.
no, thank you, because I haven't you heard that term used before, so now I know. Thank you.
And I know, Kalup, you touched on this a little bit, but you do everything for the videos that are on view at the Ringling, right? The costumes, the wigs. I mean, so you really are all encompassing in your practice, to use the word that we're.
Yeah, I guess I had never thought about the word practice, but I probably didn't use it. I probably said work. Because I usually say work just because it's the umbrella. But that's an interesting point about the word practice. I mean, I read it a lot, but I don't even know if I think of myself in the context of practice. That's what I was just thinking about. Yeah, so I just call it my work, and I was a natural performer, and I went to school to be a visual artist and learn the visual aspects of it, and then I ended up becoming, a performance artist that's based in visual art. I know, because you asked that question, what I call myself. But I don't call myself a makeup artist, because believe it or not, for some of my layered characters, I don't do my own makeup. I only do makeup for certain characters, and then I hire makeup artists to help create the subtle differences. Because if you light me a certain way, or put makeup on me, or if I shave, or put a certain wig on, for whatever reason, my face has the ability to look different. Which is something I lean into. But also, it's not just makeup, but it's also gestures and, embodiment and all of that. And so I really try to take my time developing characters and thinking about how they're going to look, how they're going to move, how they're going to sound, what they're going to wear, the wig and all of that sort of stuff, just to make them feel like different people. Like, I'm not trying to make people think it's not me, but there have been moments when people, I don't know, when I first started doing magazine shoots, I decided I was just always going to pose in a wig or a character or persona. And then some kind of way people thought I was transgendered. And then they would meet me in person like, that's not your hair, that's not your wig, you're not trans. And I was like, I'm a performance artist, I'm queer. Like, my work is kind of commenting on identity. Like, I wasn't trying to trick you. I just thought me being in a magazine looking like this is kind of on the boring side, so it's like, give me my wig, give me my outfit, my thrift store outfit, and then that's how we're gonna do the shoot. And so, so I just try to lean into what I feel is natural for myself in terms of, my work. So, yeah. But yeah, that practice word is interesting. Like you just made me. I now got to go research when the institutions actually started using that word.
Yeah, good point, Marie. Good question.
Yeah.
I did want to just briefly address, Nanette had shared a question in the chat about the genesis of this project, and I did share a link to a conversation with our curators, but it's worth mentioning that Skyway is happening this year across 4 institutions in the Tampa Bay region. So it's the Ringling and 3 others as well. All of that information is on our website, so you can see the complete show by visiting the other venues as well. There are different artists and different work on display there. So I know we're just about at time, but I wanted to give anyone who had a question the opportunity to ask it. I know we could have gone on all day with these 3. They've got so many interesting insights to share. But any last questions for our artists?
So I have a question if nobody else does.
Go for it, yeah.
I was just interesting because I think you had asked the question why we were interested in other artists. And so when I really first saw Eric's paintings, I thought he was like a good painter, and I found the paintings really intriguing. And so it was good to hear him talk about the egg thing that he makes, because I don't think that's something I ever got a chance to ask him. And then I was also with Jake, I was interested in his paintings too, but I wanted to ask him, I don't know if I ever asked him this before or not, but how do you feel about going from being on a basketball team that's like teamwork to being in your studio by yourself solo, making paintings? Like how?
That's actually a really great question, because I think one of the beauties of like team sports is there's like I guess the weight of like losing falls on everybody, so it gets dispersed. But with me, just like as a painter, as like a solo practitioner, like if a painting is a failure, I have to just wear that myself. So I definitely think that is interesting. I would say that I am team oriented, period. So I would prefer, like, I like to work in groups. I like to work closely with other people. I like to it's a weird thing, but I like to be held accountable by other people. But as like in navigating this space as an artist has been so interesting after being a basketball player, because it also kind of makes me like, I've had to confront like what my idea of labor is or was. Like I had this very like concrete, labor means you are like dripping with sweat, like it's like sweat equity, like physical output. And now, in the studio, I'll have like long studio days or whatever, and I'll leave feeling more exhausted than I ever could, like playing basketball. But it's like it's a different kind of exhaustion. It's not a physical exhaustion, right? So that's been really interesting for me, like starting to contend with my own conception of like what it means to be working and what it means to be fatigued. And you'll see it in a lot of my work. Like some of my figures will just be like stoically like dripping sweat, and it's like thinking about this pressure of just like kind of being seen, right? This pressure of just like being and existing in a space where you're on display. So it's interesting with Kalup's practice, because Kalup's practice is so rooted in theater. And I think about, I was raised like around theater. My mom was an actor in like community theater. So I started to be like really interested in like, set design and like bad set design and how much it took for something to be convincing. And then I started to really like latch on to like ideas of performance anxiety and what that meant, like what it meant to be like preparing yourself to be performing and to be on display.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Caleb, for bringing that up. I was going to mention all 3 of these artists have worked in the same circles and are familiar with one another's work. So I'm glad we had a little chance for some mutual appreciation among the 3 of you. Yeah. So I think we will conclude there. I want to thank you so much for being here, and congratulations on the show. It's a really great exhibition. Again, if you haven't seen it yet, make sure you get down there to the Ringling to check it out. And thank you, and be well, and hopefully we'll see you all soon.
Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, but thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining us.